They complimented my hands. Then the alien women refused to let me go home. Marcus Chen had never imagined that shaking hands could be considered a revolutionary act. Yet there he stood in the grand, crystalline hall of the Valorian High Council, watching as dozens of elegant alien women stared at his outstretched hand like it was some kind of divine miracle. The diplomatic mission had started normally enough. Earth's first official contact with the Valorian Empire had been years in the making, ever since their probe had detected the sprawling civilization on the far side of the Andromeda Relay. The Valorians had welcomed humanity with open arms, or at least that's what the initial transmissions had suggested. They were eager for cultural exchange, technological cooperation, and peaceful relations. Marcus, as one of Earth's leading xenobiologists, had been thrilled to be selected for the delegation. The Valorian homeworld was breathtaking. Towering spires of crystal and metal rose from lush valleys, connected by bridges that seemed to float on air. The cities glowed with a soft bioluminescence that made everything feel dreamlike. The Valorians themselves were striking beings, tall and graceful with skin that shimmered in shades of blue and violet. They moved with an elegance that made human motion seem clumsy by comparison. But it was during the welcoming banquet that things had taken their first strange turn. Marcus had been seated at a long table carved from a single piece of amber-colored stone. The other human delegates were scattered throughout the hall, each paired with Valorian hosts who seemed genuinely interested in learning about Earth culture. The food was unusual but delicious, served on platters that floated to the table on some kind of anti-gravity technology. Everything was going perfectly. Then High Counselor Thessa, the leader of the Valorian government, had risen to give a toast. She was an imposing figure, easily 7 feet tall with intricate patterns of silver threading through her violet skin. Her robe seemed to shift colors as she moved, and when she spoke, the entire hall fell silent. Marcus hadn't understood all of her words. The translation devices they'd been given worked well but occasionally struggled with Valorian idioms. But the general message was clear enough. Welcome, friendship, a bright future together. Standard diplomatic fare. It was after the toast that everything changed. A Valorian woman seated near Marcus had dropped her drinking vessel. It was a delicate thing, made of what looked like blown glass, and it rolled across the table toward the edge. Without thinking, Marcus had simply reached out and caught it before it could fall and shatter. He'd picked it up with his fingers, examined it briefly to make sure it wasn't damaged, and then handed it back to the woman with a polite smile. The woman had stared at his hand like he'd just performed magic. She'd said something in rapid Valorian, her voice rising with what sounded like excitement. Other women at nearby tables had turned to look. Within moments, a crowd had begun to gather around Marcus, all of them staring at his hands with expressions that ranged from wonder to something that looked almost like hunger. Marcus had laughed nervously, holding up his hands in a gesture meant to calm the situation. That had only made it worse. The Valorians had gasped, several of them reaching out as if to touch him before pulling back at the last moment. High Counselor Thessa had cut through the crowd like a ship through water. She'd approached Marcus with an intensity in her eyes that made him want to step back, but diplomatic training had kept him rooted in place. She gestured toward his hands, speaking slowly so the translator could keep up. "Forgive our reaction, honored guest," she'd said. "But we have never seen such appendages on a male before. May I?" Thessa had examined it like a scientist studying a rare specimen. She turned it over, gently pressed on his fingers to watch them move, traced the lines of his palm with one long finger. Her expression had been unreadable, but the other Valorians watching had begun to whisper among themselves with growing excitement. "Remarkable," Thessa had finally said. "Fully articulated digits, opposable thumb, precision grip capability. And you can control each finger independently." That's when one of the human delegates, Ambassador Rodriguez, had pushed through the crowd. She was a veteran diplomat who negotiated first contact with 3 other species, and Marcus could see concern etched on her face despite her professional smile. "Counselor Thessa, is something wrong?" Rodriguez had asked. Thessa had released Marcus's hand, but her gaze had remained locked on it. "Wrong? No, Ambassador, quite the opposite. We had not realized that human males possess such capabilities. Our males have appendages, of course, but they are largely vestigial, useful only for the most basic grasping. We had assumed this was universal among intelligent species. Now that he was paying attention, he could see Valorian males scattered throughout the crowd, though they were far fewer in number than the females. And their hands, he realized with a start, were nothing like human hands. They had what looked like flippers or paddles with barely distinguishable digits, more like fins than fingers. On Earth, both males and females have the same hand structure, Rodriguez had explained carefully. There's no significant difference in manual dexterity between the sexes. Marcus had felt increasingly uncomfortable as more and more Valorian women had gathered to stare at him. Finally, Thessa had turned back to the humans. Marcus Chen of Earth, would you be willing to demonstrate your manual capabilities for the assembled guests? We would be honored to witness what your species considers normal. He'd shown them how he could write with a stylus, button his jacket, tie his shoelace, manipulate small objects, and perform basic tasks that any human could do. With each demonstration, the crowd's reactions had grown more intense. Then Thessa had brought out a traditional Valorian puzzle, a complex mechanical device that supposedly only the most skilled female artisans could solve. She'd explained that it required extreme precision and fine motor control. The current record for solving it was held by a master craftswoman who had devoted decades to perfecting her technique. Marcus had solved it in under 3 minutes. The hall had fallen completely silent. Then Thessa had done something that made Marcus's blood run cold. She'd knelt before him, her tall frame bending in what was clearly a gesture of deep reverence. The other Valorians in the hall had followed suit, hundreds of elegant alien women dropping to their knees. The prophecy, Thessa had whispered, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. The dexterous one has come. The Valorians had agreed, though Marcus could feel their eyes following him as he'd been escorted from the hall. Back in their quarters, the human delegation had gathered for an emergency meeting. Marcus had explained everything that had happened while the others compared notes from their own experiences throughout the evening. I did some research while you were demonstrating, said Dr. Sarah Kim, the mission's xenoanthropologist. She'd pulled up holographic displays showing Valorian physiology. Their species has extreme sexual dimorphism. Females have fully developed hands like ours. Males have these flipper-like appendages. It's affected their entire civilization. All delicate work, all precision tasks, all artistry and craftsmanship is performed exclusively by females or by automation. It's ancient, possibly thousands of years old. It speaks of a being who would come from the stars, bearing the hands of creation and destruction united in one form. The prophecy suggests this being would bring about a new age for Valoria. I'm not a prophesied anything. I'm just a human with normal human hands. You're unique in their experience. Eventually, they'd agreed on a plan. Be honest about human biology, make it clear that Marcus was not special by human standards, and politely decline any attempts to treat him as a religious or prophetic figure. It had seemed reasonable at the time. The next morning, Marcus had woken to find his quarters surrounded by Valorian guards. Not threatening, they'd assured him. Just there for his protection, given his elevated status. He'd been escorted to a private breakfast with High Counselor Thessa and several other high-ranking Valorians. Thessa had been all smiles and courtesy as she'd explained what would happen next. There would be more demonstrations, public appearances where Marcus could show the Valorian people his abilities. There would be scholarly examinations, genetic studies to understand how human males had developed such capabilities. And there would be the selection process. Selection process? Marcus had asked, his coffee growing cold in his cup. For your consort, of course, Thessa had said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. A being of your significance cannot be without a proper bonded partner. Already, dozens of the most accomplished women in our society have expressed interest. You will have your choice of the finest Valoria has to offer. But Thessa had waved away his concerns with an elegant gesture of her hand. Your mate on Earth will understand. This is bigger than personal attachments. This is destiny, Marcus Chen. You were meant to come here, meant to show us what is possible. Ancient law is clear. The dexterous one, once revealed, must remain among the people to share his gifts. Technical difficulties, the Valorian attendants had told him. They'd have it fixed soon. He tried to leave his quarters, intending to find Ambassador Rodriguez or any of the other humans. The guards had been polite but firm. For his safety, it was better if he remained in the residential wing. Too many excited crowds outside. They wouldn't want him to be overwhelmed. Marcus had spent the day pacing his luxurious prison, trying to figure out what to do. The quarters were beautiful, filled with every comfort he could imagine. But the door wouldn't open when he approached it. The windows were sealed, and every time he tried to contact anyone from Earth, the systems mysteriously malfunctioned. As the sun set over the crystal cities of Veloria, casting everything in shades of purple and gold, Marcus had stood at his window and wondered how something as simple as having functional hands could have turned into a nightmare. Tomorrow, Thessa had said, the public presentations would begin. The Velorian people were eager to see their prophesied savior, and in 3 days the selection ceremony would take place. Marcus had looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers. These ordinary appendages that he'd taken for granted his entire life were now the reason he was trapped on an alien world, surrounded by beings who saw him not as a person, but as a prophetic figure. The morning light filtered through the crystalline walls of Marcus's quarters, in shades of amber and rose. Under different circumstances, he might have found it beautiful. Instead, he'd barely slept, spending most of the night trying to find a way out of the sealed room. The door was controlled by some kind of biometric lock that only responded to Velorian females. The windows were made of material stronger than anything Earth had yet developed. Even his supposed technical difficulties with communication seemed too convenient to be accidental. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal not guards, but 3 Velorian women dressed in elaborate robes of deep blue. They bowed in unison, their movements synchronized with unsettling precision. "Honored dexterous one," the lead woman said. "We are here to prepare you for today's presentation. High Counselor Thessa requests your presence in the Grand Plaza within 2 hours." But he'd seen enough of Velorian society in the past day to know that direct confrontation wouldn't help. These people had built an entire civilization around female dominance and male subservience. They didn't understand the concept of a male refusing a female's request, especially not a male they decided was prophetically significant. "I'd like to speak with Ambassador Rodriguez first," Marcus said carefully. "It's important that I coordinate with my people. You will see them at the presentation." The women guided him through corridors he hadn't seen before, past gardens where exotic plants grew in impossible spirals, and through halls decorated with artwork that seemed to move and breathe. They brought him to a preparation chamber where they insisted on dressing him in Velorian formal wear. The garments were surprisingly comfortable, made of fabric that adjusted to his body temperature and moved like water. But they were also designed to display rather than conceal. The sleeves were short and loose, ensuring his hands and forearms would be clearly visible at all times. "The people will want to see," one of the women explained when Marcus hesitated. "Your hands are a gift to be shared, not hidden." Thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands, all gathered to see the prophesied male with functional hands. A stage had been erected in the center, visible from all angles thanks to massive holographic projectors. High Counselor Thessa waited there along with other members of the council, and off to one side Marcus could see the human delegation, Ambassador Rodriguez at the front. She caught his eye and gave him a subtle nod. At least they were here. At least he wasn't completely alone. The presentation was worse than Marcus had imagined. Thessa introduced him to the crowd with flowery language about destiny and prophecy, about how the universe had sent them a sign that change was coming. Then Marcus was asked to demonstrate his abilities. They started with simple tasks, writing his name with a stylus on a digital pad. The crowd gasped as his fingers manipulated the tool with ease, opening and closing clasps on a decorative box, more gasps, tying an intricate knot in a piece of cord. The Velorians pressed forward, their eyes fixed on his hands with an intensity that made Marcus's skin crawl. But then the demonstrations became more elaborate. They brought out musical instruments from various cultures across Veloria, instruments designed for the most skilled female musicians. Marcus had some piano training from his childhood and a bit of guitar, so he could manage basic melodies. To the Velorians, it was like watching a miracle. Some of them wept openly. Between demonstrations, various Velorian women were brought on stage. Thessa introduced each one with detailed descriptions of their accomplishments, their lineage, their positions in society. It took Marcus several introductions to understand what was happening. These were the candidates, the women who wanted to become his bonded consort. Each one approached him with reverence, speaking about what an honor it would be to join with him, to help him fulfill his destiny on Veloria. A few were scientists who wanted to study his genetics. Others were politicians who saw the advantage of being connected to a prophetic figure. Some seemed genuinely kind, but all of them looked at him with the same disturbing intensity, like he was a prize to be won rather than a person to be known. Marcus kept trying to catch Ambassador Rodriguez's eye to communicate his distress, but the crowd and the constant demonstrations made it impossible. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher in the sky. Marcus's hands began to ache from the constant use, but Thessa kept calling for more demonstrations, more proof of his abilities. It was during a break, when Marcus was finally allowed to sit and drink some water, that he noticed something odd. Among the crowds of Velorian females, there were males scattered here and there. But they weren't participating in the celebrations. They watched from the edges, their expressions unreadable, and several of them weren't even Velorian. Marcus spotted what looked like a Krillian, a species known for their exceptional vocal range. The being was male, judging by the distinctive crest patterns, and he was watching Marcus with something that looked like sympathy. Next to him stood another alien Marcus didn't recognize, vaguely humanoid but with crystalline features that caught the light. Before Marcus could wonder about this further, Thessa called him back to the stage for the final demonstration of the day. They brought out the most complex puzzle in Velorian culture, a mechanical masterwork that supposedly took years of training to even attempt. Thessa explained to the crowd that only 3 individuals in current Velorian society had ever solved it, all of them master craftswomen of advanced age. Marcus approached it reluctantly. The puzzle was beautiful, made of interlocking pieces that had to be manipulated in a specific sequence. His xenobiology training had given him good spatial reasoning skills, and his hands could do what his mind figured out. He worked methodically, ignoring the crowd's reactions, focusing on the puzzle itself. When the final piece clicked into place, the crowd erupted. Velorians surged forward, held back only by the guards surrounding the stage. They were chanting something in their language, the same phrase over and over. The translator in Marcus's ear rendered it as "the dexterous one has proven himself." He has shown us that males can possess the gifts we thought reserved for females alone. In 3 days, we will hold the bonding ceremony. Marcus Chen will choose his consort, and together they will guide Veloria into a new age. Earth expects his return as scheduled. This is not negotiable. You cannot simply keep him here against his will. What could Earth possibly provide that would compare to being revered as a living prophecy? Thessa's expression hardened. You are young, Marcus Chen. You do not yet understand your destiny. Perhaps time and counsel will help you see more clearly. Guards, please escort our honored guest back to his quarters. He must be tired from today's demonstrations. But this time, the route was different. Instead of taking him directly to his quarters, the guards led him through a section of the palace he hadn't seen before. They passed through a secured door into what looked like a residential wing, but different from the guest quarters. Smaller, more numerous rooms lined the corridors, and in those rooms, through partially open doors, Marcus caught glimpses of other beings. The Krillian he'd seen in the plaza was there, sitting in one of the rooms and reading from a holographic display. The crystalline being was in another room, apparently sculpting something from what looked like light itself. In a third room, Marcus saw what might have been a Thexian, their color-changing skins cycling through shades of blue and green. One of the guards noticed Marcus's interest. The other honored guests, she explained. Males of exceptional qualities from various species. They have been with us for some time, sharing their unique gifts with our people. How long? Polite, comfortable, well-treated prisoners, but prisoners nonetheless. Kept for their unique traits, displayed and studied and prevented from ever leaving. When Marcus was finally returned to his own quarters, he found that they had been upgraded. More luxurious furnishings, better food, entertainment systems loaded with content from across the galaxy. Everything except what he actually wanted, a working communicator and an unlocked door. He sat on the edge of the elaborate bed and stared at his hands. These normal, ordinary human hands that had somehow become his prison. He thought about Calix the Krillian, 12 years trapped here, 12 years of being honored and studied and never allowed to go home. Marcus stood and began examining his room more carefully. There had to be a way out. Some oversight in the security, some weakness he could exploit. He was a scientist, trained to observe and analyze. And he had something the Valorians didn't expect, hands that could manipulate things their males couldn't touch. As he searched, his fingers found a small vent near the floor, hidden behind a decorative panel. It was sealed, but the seal was designed for Valorian physiology. It required precise manipulation of several small catches simultaneously, something a Valorian male's flipper hands could never manage. But Marcus's hands could. The seal clicked open. Behind it was a maintenance shaft, narrow but navigable. Marcus stared into the darkness, his heart pounding. He didn't know where it led. He didn't have a plan beyond getting out of this room. But anything was better than waiting 3 days to be bonded to a stranger and trapped on this world forever. He took a deep breath, looked one more time at his hands, and began to crawl into the shaft. Whatever happened next, he was going to fight for his freedom. Even if the entire Valorian Empire thought he was destined to stay, Marcus Chen had other plans. The maintenance shaft was darker and tighter than he'd hoped, but at least it was a path forward. And sometimes that was enough. The maintenance shaft was cramped and dark, lit only by occasional strips of bioluminescent material that ran along the edges. Marcus crawled forward on his hands and knees, trying to move quietly despite the metallic echo of every movement. His enhanced quarters were behind him now, and he had no idea where this tunnel would lead, but anywhere felt better than waiting in that beautiful prison. The shaft branched in multiple directions, creating a maze of passages that seemed to run throughout the palace structure. Marcus tried to maintain a sense of direction, heading generally toward what he thought might be the exterior walls, but the twists and turns made it difficult. His knees were already sore, and dust covered his formal Valorian clothes, but he kept moving. After what felt like an hour of crawling, Marcus heard voices ahead. He froze, pressing himself against the cold metal wall of the shaft. The voices were speaking Valorian, too muffled for his translator to pick up clearly, but they didn't sound alarmed. Probably just palace workers going about their normal duties, unaware that their prophesied guest was crawling through the walls above them. Marcus waited until the voices faded, then continued forward more carefully. He came to a junction where the shaft opened into a larger vertical passage with a ladder running down its length. Looking down, he could see multiple levels, each with access panels that presumably led to different parts of the palace. Looking up showed the same, floors upon floors of this massive structure. He started climbing down, using the ladder to descend several levels. His plan, such as it was, involved getting to the lower floors where he hoped there might be maintenance exits or delivery entrances, places with less security than the grand halls above. Marcus had descended 3 levels when he heard something that made him stop, singing. A beautiful, complex melody that seemed to resonate through the metal shaft itself. He recognized it as Krillian vocalization, the kind of harmonic layering that their species was famous for. And if there was a Krillian in this part of the palace, it might be Calix, the one the guard had mentioned. Making a quick decision, Marcus climbed down to the level where the singing seemed loudest. He found an access panel and carefully examined it. Like the one in his room, it had multiple small catches that needed to be manipulated simultaneously. His fingers worked quickly, and within moments the panel swung open. Marcus peered out into a corridor similar to the one he'd been led through earlier. The singing was coming from a room just a few doors down. He climbed out of the shaft as quietly as possible and made his way toward the sound. The door to the room was partially open. Marcus knocked softly, and the singing stopped immediately. "Hello," called a voice in slightly accented standard. "Who's there?" Up close, Marcus could see that the being was smaller than most Krillians, with crest patterns that had faded somewhat with age. Calix stood near a window, a musical instrument of some kind in his hands. "Marcus Chen," Calix said, his large eyes widening. "The new arrival." "The dexterous one." There was no reverence in his tone, only a kind of sad understanding. "Just Marcus," he replied, "and I'm trying not to be here much longer. I found the maintenance shafts. I'm looking for a way out." "You've been here, what, 2 days? And you're already trying to escape?" He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "I waited 3 months before my first attempt. I thought if I was patient, if I cooperated, they would eventually let me go home. They never do. Calix moved to the door and closed it fully. The honored guests are never allowed to leave. We're too valuable, they say, too important to Valorian culture. They've convinced themselves they're doing us a favor, keeping us here in comfort, displaying our unique qualities to their people. I stopped counting the hours after the first year. That way lies madness. He studied Marcus carefully. But you have something we didn't have. Those hands of yours, they can open things, manipulate things that Valorian males can't touch. You might actually have a chance. I don't even know if the other humans are still in the palace, or if they've been sent away. Finally, the Krillian went to a panel on the wall and pulled out a small data storage device. I've been mapping this place for years, Calix said quietly. Every corridor, every shaft, every weakness in their security that I could find. I told myself I was keeping it in case an opportunity came. But the truth is, I think I've been waiting for someone like you, someone who could actually use this information. The maintenance tunnels, the guard rotations, the areas with blind spots in their surveillance. There's a delivery entrance on the eastern side of the palace, sub-level 2. It's used for bringing in supplies. The security there is lighter than other exits because they rely mostly on automated systems. They were designed that way deliberately so that if the biometric readers failed, technicians could manually override them. And those manual controls require fine motor manipulation. If I'm caught helping you escape, they'll increase security on all of us. The little freedoms we have, the ability to move around our wing, access to entertainment and communication within the palace, all of that could be taken away. I wouldn't ask if I had any other choice. 12 years I've been here and not once has anyone from my homeworld come looking for me. They probably think I'm dead. But you have people who will fight for you. A whole delegation, a whole planet that knows you're here. If you escape, if you make it back to your people and tell them what's happening here, maybe something will change. Maybe they'll demand the release of all of us. I'll make sure Earth knows about you, about all of the others. We won't leave you here. Vex the Thexian artist, Sharek the Luminian sculptor, and 2 others who arrived more recently. If we're going to do this, we should do it together. All of us or none of us. More people meant more risk of discovery, but it also meant they could help each other. And the idea of leaving the others behind while he escaped alone felt wrong. How do we contact them without alerting the palace security? Marcus asked. The rooms in this wing have internal communication that's monitored, but there are ways around it, Calix explained. We've developed our own signals over the years, simple things the Valorians don't pay attention to. Give me an hour to make contact and explain what's happening. Guard patrol patterns, times when certain corridors were empty, which doors had mechanical overrides versus purely biometric locks. It was the work of years, all compiled by someone who had given up hope of using it himself. One by one, the others arrived. Vex was a Thexian whose skin currently showed swirls of nervous purple and orange. They had been captured for their artistic abilities, their capacity to change their body's coloration to create living paintings. Sharek the Luminian was barely visible except as a shimmer in the air, their crystalline form refracting light in beautiful patterns. The other 2 were a Dendarian, whose species was known for mathematical ability, and a Paxian who apparently could control their body temperature to extreme degrees. All of them had been trapped here for years. All of them had unique traits that the Valorians found fascinating and wanted to display, and all of them had long since given up hope of escape. This is insane, Vex said, their skin flashing red with anxiety. Even if we make it to the delivery entrance, even if Marcus can manipulate the controls, what then? We steal a vehicle, somehow make it to the spaceport, get past planetary security. If we can reach them, if we can get a message out, they might be able to help. We'll never get another chance. This is the opportunity we've been waiting for. They spent the next hour planning, going over the route, discussing contingencies. Marcus uploaded Calix's map to his own devices and memorized the path to the delivery entrance. They would move in 2 groups, taking different routes to avoid drawing attention. If one group was caught, the other would continue. As the time to move approached, Marcus felt the weight of what they were about to attempt. These beings were trusting him, betting years of their lives on his ability to manipulate mechanical systems with his human hands. If he failed, the consequences would fall on all of them. "There's one more thing," Calix said as they prepared to leave. "If we do get caught, they'll ask how you got out of your room, how you found the maintenance shafts. Don't mention that I helped. Tell them you figured it out yourself. Your hands, your intelligence, whatever. Just don't give them a reason to punish the others." Calix had survived here for 12 years by being careful, by protecting himself and the small community of captives. Even now, planning an escape, he was thinking about survival. They moved out in silence, slipping into the corridors during a gap in the guard patrols that Calix had identified. The palace was quieter at night, but not empty. They had to hide twice, pressing into alcoves as Valorian staff passed by. Each time, Marcus's heart pounded so hard he was sure it would give them away. The maintenance shafts were even more cramped with 6 of them, but they managed. Down through the levels, following the path Calix had mapped. At one point, they had to wait for nearly 20 minutes while guards conducted what seemed to be a routine inspection of the area below them. Marcus's legs cramped from holding still, but he didn't dare move. Finally, they reached sub-level 2. The delivery entrance was ahead, just as Calix had described. But as they approached the final access panel, alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the palace. Red lights flashed in the corridors. Someone had discovered Marcus was missing. And now they had to choose: abort and try to make it back to their rooms, or push forward to the delivery entrance and hope they could get through before security locked everything down. The alarms shrieked through the palace corridors, a piercing sound that seemed designed to disorient and panic. Marcus pressed himself against the wall of the maintenance shaft, his mind racing. Behind him, the other captives waited in tense silence, looking to him for direction even though he'd only been on this planet for 3 days. "We keep going," Marcus said, making the decision. "If we turn back now, they'll increase security on all of us. This might be our only chance. Once those alarms started, we have maybe 5 minutes before they lock down all the exits, maybe less." The delivery entrance was visible across the bay, a large door currently sealed shut. Next to it was the control panel Calix had told him about, covered by a maintenance access plate. Marcus ran to it, his fingers already working on the catches. The others spread out, watching the corridors for guards. Vex's skin had gone completely white with fear, while Shorak shimmered anxiously, refracting the red alarm lights into scattered rainbows. The maintenance plate came free, revealing a complex array of mechanical controls beneath the biometric reader. Marcus could see the logic of the system, how it was designed to fail safely if the electronic components stopped working. But the manual override required simultaneous manipulation of 6 different switches in a specific sequence, while holding down 2 pressure plates. It was exactly the kind of task that Valorian males couldn't perform, and that their females would never need to, since they could simply use the biometric reader. Marcus's hands moved quickly, his xenobiology training helping him understand the alien engineering. Press here, turn this, hold these 2 down while activating those 3. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he worked. "Guards coming from the east corridor," Quelix called out in a tense whisper. 60 seconds, maybe less." The pressure plates were stiff, requiring him to brace his thumbs while his other fingers continued working. The delivery door suddenly groaned and began to slide open. "It's working," Shorak exclaimed, but the door was moving slowly, far too slowly. Marcus could see the guards now rounding the corner, 4 of them armed with some kind of energy weapons. They shouted when they saw the escaping captives, raising their weapons. "Through the door now," Marcus yelled, abandoning the controls to sprint toward the opening. The gap was barely wide enough, but they squeezed through one by one. Calix first, then Vex, Shorak flowing through like living light. Quelix and the Paxian followed. Marcus was last. He threw himself through the gap just as energy bolts sizzled past, leaving scorch marks on the door frame. He hit the ground hard, rolling, his formal Valorian clothes tearing on the rough pavement outside. They were out, actually out of the palace. The exterior loading area was empty at this hour, illuminated by the soft glow of Valoria's twin moons. Transport vehicles sat silent in orderly rows. Beyond them, Marcus could see the lights of the city spreading out in all directions. "The spaceport is 12 kilometers northwest," Calix said, already moving toward the nearest vehicle. "If we can make it there, if we can get a message to your delegation's ship before security grounds everything." The palace security was adapting, spreading outward. Soon they'd seal off the entire district. Marcus ran to one of the transport vehicles and examined its controls. Like the door, it had a biometric lock for primary access, but there was a manual override hidden beneath a panel. His hands were already moving before he fully understood what he was doing, muscle memory and problem-solving intuition working together. The vehicle hummed to life. "Everyone in," Marcus called. They piled into the transport, a vehicle designed to carry cargo but large enough for all 6 of them. Marcus slid into the pilot's seat, grateful that the basic controls seemed intuitive enough. Forward, back, up, down. How different could alien vehicles be from human ones? Very different, as it turned out. The transport lurched forward with stomach-churning acceleration, nearly throwing everyone from their seats. Marcus wrestled with the controls, trying to smooth out their movement as they shot out of the loading area and into the streets of the sleeping city. Behind them, lights were coming on in the palace. More alarms. Marcus could see security vehicles beginning to mobilize, their distinctive blue lights starting to appear in the distance. "Take the third right," Calix called out, standing behind Marcus and pointing. "That route has fewer security checkpoints." The city was beautiful, Marcus had to admit, even in his panic. Everything designed with elegant curves and artistic flourishes, built by a society where all precision work was performed by skilled female hands. They'd made it perhaps 3 kilometers when the pursuit vehicles appeared. Sleek security cruisers, far faster than the clunky cargo transport Marcus was piloting. Energy weapons fired, warning shots that lit up the night sky. "They're not trying to destroy us," Vex observed, their skin flickering with orange anxiety. "They want to disable the vehicle and capture us alive. Too important to their collections." His eyes scanned the streets ahead, looking for anything that might help. That's when he saw it. A construction site, one of the massive projects that the Valorians seem to have everywhere in their cities. Huge pieces of building material suspended by magnetic lifts, automated systems working through the night. And running through it, a narrow passage between 2 partially completed towers. "Hold on," Marcus shouted, yanking the controls hard. The transport veered sharply, diving toward the construction site. The passage between the towers was barely wide enough, never meant for a vehicle of this size. But Marcus threaded the needle, scraping along both sides, while debris and sparks flew. Behind them, the first security vehicle tried to follow and clipped one of the towers. Its magnetic stabilizers failed, sending it spiraling into a controlled crash. 2 more security vehicles remained, but now Marcus had bought them some distance. The transport burst out of the construction site and onto a main thoroughfare heading northwest toward the spaceport. "I can't believe that worked," Shorak said, his crystalline form vibrating with what might have been laughter. But their relief was short-lived. Ahead, more security vehicles were appearing, moving to block the road. And above, Marcus could see aerial units beginning to deploy. The Valorians were marshalling their full security force. "There are too many," Calix said quietly. "We're not going to make it to the spaceport." "Marcus Chen, this is Ambassador Rodriguez. If you can hear this, respond immediately. We've got company, and we need extraction now. The Valorians are claiming you've kidnapped several of their honored guests." Then Rodriguez spoke again, her voice tight. "The delegation ship is launching now. We're coming to get you, but Marcus, you need to understand what you've just started. This is going to become a major diplomatic incident." Marcus could see the spaceport in the distance, but they'd never make it at this rate. The transport was slowing, hit by multiple disabling shots. Systems were failing. They were going to be caught. Then the night sky lit up with new lights. The human delegation's ship, dropping out of orbit faster than was probably safe, its shields glowing as it hit the atmosphere. It was smaller than the Valorian security vessels, but newer, equipped with Earth's latest technology. The ship descended directly over the struggling transport, its tractor beam locking on. Marcus felt the vehicle lift off the ground, pulled upward despite the Valorian security forces' attempts to stop it. "Got you," Rodriguez's voice came through the communicator. "Hang on, this is going to be rough." Marcus and the others tumbled out of the damaged vehicle, looking around in amazement. They were safe. Actually safe. Human crew members rushed forward to help them, medical scanners already out to check for injuries. Rodriguez appeared from the bridge, her expression a mix of relief and exasperation. Marcus Chen, she said, you just escaped from a high-security palace, stole a government vehicle, and caused an interplanetary incident. The Valorians are screaming for your return. High Counselor Thessa is threatening to cut all diplomatic ties with Earth. 12 years held against his will because they found his voice interesting. The others have similar stories. The Valorians have been collecting rare alien males and keeping them as living exhibits. She looked at each of the rescued captives, seeing their relief and fear and desperate hope. Her jaw tightened. Get them to medical, she ordered her crew. Full examinations, document everything, and get me a line to Earth Command. They need to know what we've found here. These people would still be trapped there if you hadn't acted. The Valorians thought they could keep their dirty secret hidden, thought no one would question their treatment of males because their society had normalized it. But you've dragged it into the light, Marcus. You've made it impossible to ignore. Marcus watched through a viewport, thinking about what they were leaving behind. What about the Valorian males? He asked quietly. The ones who were born there who have never known anything different. We can't force a society to change, but we can refuse to ignore what's happening. We can make it clear that Earth won't maintain diplomatic relations with a government that treats sapient beings as collectibles. And we can tell this story, make sure the whole galaxy knows. Calix and the others shared their experiences, their testimonies documented and verified. The images of the honored guests' wing, the proof of systematic captivity, all of it went public. The Valorian government initially tried to deny everything, then to justify it, then finally fell silent as pressure mounted from multiple directions. Other species came forward with similar stories, males who had disappeared on diplomatic missions to Valoria, never heard from again. Earth's response was swift. Diplomatic relations were suspended, trade agreements were frozen. And a formal demand was made. Release all captives, implement reforms, or face complete isolation from the interstellar community. 6 months later, Marcus stood in a lecture hall on Earth, teaching a class on xenobiology and ethics. On the screen behind him was footage from Valoria, recent footage showing changes that would have seemed impossible half a year ago. The first Valorian male admitted to the Science Academy. Protests in the Crystal Cities demanding equal rights. A reformation movement led by a scientist named Dr. Asara, who had contacted Earth to thank Marcus for forcing us to see what we had become. Can a society built on such fundamental inequality actually transform itself? The Valorians are proud people with a rich culture, but they'd built that culture on a foundation of oppression. Now they have to decide. Do they cling to their old ways and face isolation, or do they evolve into something better? But he'd included a note. I'm teaching young Krillians about the importance of standing up for freedom, even when it seems impossible. Your hands opened a door, Marcus, but all of us walked through it together. The universe is full of species with different biologies, different capabilities, different strengths. What matters isn't what we can do with our bodies, but what we choose to do with them. My hands aren't special because of their structure. They're only meaningful because of how I chose to use them. To help others, to fight for freedom, to open doors that had been locked too long. Marcus gathered his materials, thinking about the strange journey that had begun with a simple compliment about his hands. He'd gone to Valoria as a scientist on a diplomatic mission. He'd left as something else entirely, a symbol perhaps, but more importantly, a person who had refused to accept that gilded cages could ever be acceptable, no matter how beautiful. His communicator chimed with a new message. It was from Dr. Asara on Valoria. The message was brief but powerful. The council has been dissolved. Elections are being planned. For the first time in our history, males will be allowed to vote. Change is slow, but it's happening. Thank you for showing us what we couldn't see ourselves. Then he picked up his bag and headed out of the lecture hall, ready for whatever came next. In the end, it wasn't about having special abilities or being prophesied or chosen. It was about recognizing injustice and having the courage to act, even when the odds seemed impossible. It was about using whatever gifts you had, whether exceptional hands or exceptional voice or exceptional will, to make the universe a little more free. And that, Marcus had learned, was a power everyone possessed. They just had to choose to.